Hi everyone, welcome back to Great Northern Cascade Division N-Scale. My name's Ian, and in this video I'm going to be looking at installing Tortoise switch machines and some switch paneling on the layout as well, like the one that's kind of hanging over my shoulder. A while ago I did a video where I kind of looked at some of the options for controlling switch machines. Wasn't particularly happy with the Digitrax SC74 to be also able to do some signaling as well as controlling the switch machines. But after a whole bunch of different exploration, I basically decided, yeah, I'm going to go with Tortoise switch machines. Didn't go with the smells, which is basically the same thing, but adds onboard DCC. A couple of reasons for that. One, I'm not really going to be using DCC control. And two, there was a couple of hesitations that I had in terms of being able to maintain the state of those, even if I was going to be doing some kind of computerized control. Signaling wise, I'm going to explore in a series of videos coming after this, but again, the Tortoise switch machines, they have two internal switches that are built into those. One of those controls the frog power for me, which is great. I'm using Atlas code 55 turnouts, number 10s, mostly some number 7s, and that'll be in the yards. Almost everything's number 10s, and they have electro connections to be able to do electro frogs and do all the power routing correctly. I just haven't actually been able to light that up with power. So now that I can start putting these Tortoise switch machines in, I can get that going. So as you throw the switch machine, the correct DCC phase gets sent to it, and so the trains go through without stalling, without shorting out or anything like that. So that's great. Other thing that I've then been doing is just using straight double pole, double throw switches and a couple of LEDs. And again, Circuitron have all the explanation how to do this. I laser cut and engraved some panels just kind of as a proof of concept. I'm going to come back and do probably slightly thicker acrylic for it. This was just what I could quickly get off Amazon, so I could give this a go. So I'm going to come back and do that, but at least now I've got one panel here for the Seattle return loop with a pair of switches. I've got the one panel over my shoulder that's controlling 5 Tortoise switch machines on the south side of the Seattle stations, for King Street Station and Union Station. And I have another little panel with 2 Tortoise switch machines on the north end of the station as you would come out of those stations and go into the tunnel that goes into downtown Seattle. So go through in this video, not necessarily a how-to, not necessarily a review on how to install Tortoise switch machines. There's a ton of those that are already out there on the internet. We'll do some time-lapse stuff just so you can kind of see what I'm doing. The same with doing the actual paneling. It's really just following the instructions that come from Circuitron on how you do that. And I'm not doing the little connector blocks that you can put on the bottom of the Tortoise switch machines either. You can do like screw terminal connector blocks that go on the bottom, but they can be like $4, $5, $6 a piece depending on how many you're getting at a time. And with a layout this big, triple deck, 500 plus feet of mainline track and the number of stations, yards, and industries I'm going to have, that just mathematically just doesn't make sense. So I'm okay with spending 5 minutes or so soldering those up. So you'll see me as I go through. I'm soldering all the wires on. You might be sitting there and thinking, why don't you just do the screw terminal connections? Especially when it comes to wiring it up. And I sometimes have to flip wiring for DCC or for the accessory bus because the switch machine gets flipped around. And yeah, if I was using the screw terminal connections, I could just swap them, but whatever. For what I'm doing, it works out. And again, as I would scale up and do it across the size of the layout, it's just not worth me spending that kind of money. So let's go and have a look as I go through and get all these Tortoise switch machines and the paneling installed on the Seattle Station area in South Seattle on this turnaround loop. All right, so we are on the north side of the Seattle stations, up on the third deck here of the layout. We've got King Street Station here, Union Station on the near side to the kind of aisleway here. And what we've got is there are 2 platforms that are coming through an Atlas code 55 number 10 turnout, and the same here coming in from Union Station. And then those tracks would move through right around here is going to be the tunnel portal that will take them out into downtown Seattle. So what I've already done on this north side, underneath there are 2 Tortoise switch machines from Circuitron. This is what I decided to go with. I kind of explored a few different options. On previous layouts, I have used micro servos and kind of done some of the Thames Valley Depot stuff. with Octopus 3 and then put on the Octo decoder to get DCC control. I have tried SEEPs PM1 point motors. I've done various different approaches over the years, and honestly, when you then put everything together, the cost of the Tortoise switch machine actually comes up pretty close to some of those other options. So that's what I'm going with, at least for here. There is a cost to them, but I think it's kind of worth it for the simplicity, which we'll look at in a couple of minutes here. But what I have is the two Tortoise switch machines. I have some LEDs kind of hanging out under there where I was testing some basic signaling stuff. And then on the front here, I have just a very, very basic panel that I laser cut on some two-tone 3mm acrylic. So it's got a very small black layer on the top, and then the rest is white. Now, this is just a quick and dirty mock-up. The dogs are playing around upstairs. This is just a quick and dirty mock-up. I think what I'll eventually do is use probably 5mm acrylic, because it is a little bit thin on the back. Now, this will also be mounted, once we have some kind of fascia on here, it will be mounted more in there, whereas at the moment, what we're getting is some backlighting coming through from the actual layout lighting here, and so that's why it's kind of washing out a little bit. But what we have, we kind of spin around and look on the back, is a couple of double throw switches. DP/DT switches here, and so some of those then run off to the Tortoise switch machines, and then some of those are controlling the LEDs that are on the back. We'll get more into the wiring in a little bit, but this is just to kind of give an overview of what we have. And so the idea is that I can then throw the switch, and then the Tortoise switch machine over here is then moving accordingly, and it's kind of hard to see in the lighting because of that backlighting, but the LED is changing if we come and do the one for Union Station. All right, and so this is kind of what we want to do on the south side of the layout. I've got this north side done. I've also got the return loop done. There's another little fascia panel over there, wired basically the exact same as here. I'm wanting to go for manual control. I don't want DCC integration. I looked at doing the SC74 from Digitrax, didn't want to go that route. There's been a bunch of different videos in the past on the channel, but for the needs of this layout, I just want the Tortoise switch machines. I don't want the smells because I don't care about DCC control. I'm okay just with these manual panels. Again, I don't want DCC control. I don't want to connect this into JMRI where it could do some amount of determination as to which state it is and reset to certain states on startup and stuff like that. If you want to do that, more power to you. But we're now going to go through and do the south side of the layout, where rather than just having two of these turnouts, two of the Tortoise switch machines, we're going to have 5. And so we'll go through and I'll kind of step through how I do one of the Tortoise switch machines, get it connected, wired into the panel, and then probably just a quick time lapse as I blitz through and do the other 4. All right, so we've come down to the south end of the station. There is the other panel down here that we were just checking out. Come down to the south end of the station. This gets a little bit more complicated just because we have more platforms as it starts to fan out. So on the right-hand side, we have 3 platforms that are forming Union Station. These 2 near side ones go straight through. And then on the back side for King Street Station, we actually fan out into 4 different platforms. And these 2 on the right-hand side go straight through. And then the 2 on the back kind of dead-ended. So what we're going to end up doing is I've already gone ahead and laser cut this. We'll have a little bit of a quick look later on as to how I went and do this, because the first point of order is to get this Tortoise switch machine installed. I find these super duper easy to install, especially compared to having to do micro servos, PM1, capacitor-based motors and stuff like that. Those dogs are really having fun time upstairs, and partly because this template makes it really, really easy to install. Now, when I went through and I installed one of these turnouts, we're going to pick on this near one here. I had already put the frog wire on. I soldered that and dropped it down. That's just been kind of hanging out there. And I had also pre-drilled a hole, and I will double check and put up on the screen right now exactly the diameter of what that hole was, but it's been working fine when I've been doing the point motors, and Circuitron do actually have a recommendation for what you would use. Now, there's a bunch of tutorial videos out there on the internet, so I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of this, but essentially what we'll do once I put the camera down and go ahead and do it is we'll end up mounting the Tortoise switch machine somewhere around there. We've got the hole that's been drilled through here that you kind of center up around in the middle of where the throw arm is going to be moving backwards and forwards, something like that. And again, this little template makes it so much easier. And so what I can often do is put a little bit of sticky tack on the back, line that up so that the hole is in place, and then I can just quickly put a pen or a pencil mark through the holes, because there's going to be 4 screws that hold it in place. Quickly drill that, and then can run the screws in, back and back out again, and it's super easy to then do it. Before we can even get it on the layout, though, we need to go and do some wiring. So let's hover to the workbench and check out what we need to do to get this wired up. Alright, so this is the instruction sheet that comes from Circuitron on how you install the Tortoise switch machines. And like I was saying, on the bottom of the switch machines we have these 8 different terminals, and they've already got a hole through and then a little solder pad, and so it makes it really easy just to feed the wire through, drop it through, and depending on how well it can focus, there's a much smaller one, so I kind of make a loop, and then it's super duper easy to solder these up. On the instruction sheet, and I'll put a bigger version of this on the video so you can see it, it's kind of telling you that there's 2 internal switches that you can use for controlling various different things. The actual only thing that you need is the power for the motor. It's the 2 outside terminals, 1 and 8. And so on the layout here, that comes from my accessory bus. And actually on the bottom, what we'll look at is how you wire in that double pole, double throw switch. But really the 1 and 8 are the only terminals that are being used to actually control the motor being thrown one way or the other. And then, like I said, there are 2 internal switches that then get used, so that depending on how the turnout has been thrown, basically these 2 internal switch also get thrown. There's nothing you do. The switch machine does this for you, but it then means you can pull off one of the feeds for something like the frog power, for example, which is how I have mine. And so I've kind of labeled what color wiring I'm used, but basically on my layout I have white and then blue as my DCC bus. And so for pins 6 and 7, I then have the DCC bus that comes into that, and then on pin 5 I pull off that frog power. And so as power is applied to pins 1 and 8 on the Tortoise motor, and the motor gets thrown one way or the other, this little internal switch gets thrown one way or the other. It's not really plus and minus, it's a phase with DCC, but to try and keep it simple, I think about it as plus and minus. It's not polarity though, it's a phase. But basically as the point motor gets thrown, it then connects to either the blue or the white wire from my DCC accessory bus. And basically all it's doing is then flipping that frog power accordingly, so that when locomotives move through it, we don't have any kind of shorts. We have power that runs all the way through on the rails correctly, depending on how it's thrown. On this other internal switch, I then have my LED connected, and so it's a little bit different on how this one's wired. Again, a bigger picture will help, but we have our accessory bus wiring that's coming in. LED is then on the other side of it, and so depending on which way it's thrown, it creates the LED circuit one way or the other to light up one of those 2 different LEDs that we have on the panel. So basically both of the LEDs are set up so that the anode, I think it is connected out to the accessory bus, and then the cathode is depending on how this internal switch is being thrown. And so again, the circuit gets complete for one LED or the other, depending on how this Tortoise switch machine is thrown. So for your layout, you might not need all of this, depending on how you're doing it. But for what I am doing, 5, 6, and 7 are driving my frog power for DCC, and 2, 3, and 4 is what we're going to be using to drive the LEDs. Down on the bottom, then we have a double pole, double throw switch example of how that gets wired in. And basically we make a cross between terminals on the double pole, double throw switch, depending on how we're throwing it. And then we're going to feed in accessory bus power, and then we're going to come out to the actual Tortoise itself. And so again, depending on whether that switch is up or down, it basically creates the appropriate circuit to send out that accessory bus, positive and negative, to throw the Tortoise switch machine one way or the other. Again, all of this is documented out. It's fairly basic wiring. There's really not a whole lot to it. If you follow the instructions, if you follow the wiring examples that are in here, it'll work for you. So let's have a quick time lapse as I cut a bunch of wires, solder a bunch of wires up, and get this Tortoise switch machine ready to go out on the layout. I'm going to put between 6 and 9 inches of wire onto each of these. It's all 24 gauge wiring that I'm using, just so that when we get it over onto the layout, I don't end up too short. But again, depending on your layout and how you're going to be doing it, you might need shorter or longer wires that go into the motor. Alright, so this is the wiring all complete. This was not an instruction in how to solder. I have certain ways that I do things, and at this point in my life, I am probably too old to change that. But a little bit of flux just to help the solder run a little bit smoother. And then, like I say, it's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of huck the wire over, and so the solder should then flow through quite nicely, nice shiny solder. And I would probably at this point go ahead and do the wiring as well. I'm going to leave that because we're going to look at that when we do the paneling part. I also didn't strip the ends of any of the wires because it's kind of a waste of time, because once you get over onto the layout and you find out exactly how long you need the wiring to be, you're probably going to trim them and then do it over there anyway. So we're going to kind of skip the toggle switch for now, because what we can actually do is just use the black and red wires, just touch them against the accessory bus to make it move in either direction when we need to make sure that we have it mounted correctly and we have the throw arm that comes through correctly. One thing that I'm going to do off camera quick is there's a little screw that you run in first and then back it out, just to make sure that it'll bite in there properly. Again, this isn't a how-to on how to install Tortoise motors. This is just the process that I'm going through, because I have another folder I'm going to be doing on the south side of the station. So let's switch over to that south side of the station, get the template in place, get the little holes drilled, and then get this one mounted up. All right, so come over to do this first switch on this south side of the layout, and so I'm going to drop drill bit through just so that can get it lined up with where it will then be. And again, this isn't really an instructional video by any means. This is just the process that I'm going through to do these. Like to put in a couple of the back screws underneath the layout first, and again, hopefully don't completely block the view of what's happening here. And this just kind of makes it so that I can almost slide the Tortoise in place. Not going to screw it all of the way in, just enough so that as I put the Tortoise motor in place, it's going to be able to catch it. Right, so I got that part done. What I'm now going to do, I'm going to head back over to the workbench, because I need to take this straight piece of wire and bend it into a certain pattern. Forgot to do that when I was over on the workbench wiring it up. So I'm going to bend this following the pattern. Basically just lay it down on top of the instruction sheet from Circuitron and bend it, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so have that wire now bent. A little bit hard to see maybe is because it's so small, but there is a pattern that you follow to be able to bend this. So kind of one thing that I do not like about the Tortoise switch machines is that they kind of make you figure out how to do that rather than having it already done. Alright, I'm kind of digging through my wires because it's kind of hard to see on the camera at the moment, but this is in the middle position of where it can throw, and I need to be able to get it into one of its end positions before I kind of feed it through and would start to tighten it up. At least that's the way I do it. I don't know if that's actually the way that Circuitron say to do it. So, what I should be able to do is just touch those and it moves. And so if we then swap over what we're touching, then it moves back the other way, right? Basically it. And a little bit fiddly here. I'm going to feed it up through the hole, and we'll bring the camera up after I've done this and kind of. Actually, I've forgotten the step. Everyone's sitting screaming at their computer. You're an idiot. We have these little green pieces that, again, one thing they don't like is that these aren't already on there. And so, like me, you have to remember to do it. You have to remember to put it the right way, even. But it does mean that there's different mounting options that you can have depending on how you want to go. Except now I've got to try and feed it back through again. So. But from all the other different options that I've done for point motors, it's really not that bad. So again, let's touch contacts on the wire here, and nope, let's swap them the other way. There we go. And I'll move the camera up top so you can then see it, that as the turnout motor throws, it moves from side to side correctly, exactly how I want. So I'm going to move the camera up so you can see what's actually been happening. Alright, so let's see if I can get the wiring the right way around. This is the one that we've been working on here. And let's see. No, other way. So then as we kind of touch the black and red wires on contacts 1 and 8 on the frog motor to that accessory bus, it then throws one way or the other. Doesn't take a lot to move them in N scale, but that's pretty much what it is to get the Tortoise point motor installed. So a bunch of other wires that are still hanging down. Now let's have a look at how we can do this panel piece. Alright, so I am going to throw a diagram up on screen as we go through this, but we have our double pole, double throw switch, and on this panel I am just going to feed it through, and then off camera I'm going to kind of screw it in place. Just a little bit easier, I feel, to do it on here. We don't get the soldering iron hot enough that it's really going to cause a problem. And then on here what we'll do is let's say that it's going to be, and I don't know if it's even right, anyone who does more electronics will be able to tell me better, but let's call it terminals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What we're going to do is cross terminals 1 and 6. We're going to cross terminals 2 and 5. We're going to have a couple of feeder wires that come off terminals 1 and 2, and they are going to go to our accessory bus. That's what's going to bring in our power from the accessory bus. And then these two middle ones are what's going to connect into the Tortoise switch machine. But before we connect into the Tortoise switch machine, what we're going to do is we're going to wire in a couple of LEDs. And we're going to flip-flop the wiring on the LEDs back into terminal 3. And we're then going to have the wiring feed off into either one of those Tortoise point motor contacts, 1 or 4, 1 or 8, sorry. And this is where the coloring kind of breaks down, because when we actually get to the layout, depending on the orientation of the switch machine, sometimes you then have to flip the connections when you're making them. It kind of runs in reverse. LEDs you can just move in place, but the actual final connections into the machine, switch machine, sometimes you have to swap those over. But essentially what we're doing is we're bringing in the accessory bus power on terminals 1 and 2. We're then flipping it over with a double pole double throw switch that as we throw it will reverse the polarity of what's going out. That's how the Tortoise switch machine can move from one side or the other. We're basically just going to flip the power to that, kind of the same when we were touching the wires on the accessory bus. Depending on the polarity of it, it would move one way or the other. And then the LEDs are basically being wired in so that, again, as you would throw the switch, it is then going to be using that internal switch on the Tortoise to then flip the polarity. And depending on the polarity, because it can only flow one way through the LEDs, one LED or the other lights up. Again, maybe it makes a little bit more sense with the diagram that was on screen. I didn't figure this out. I just followed the instructions that were on the Circuitron instruction sheets. All right, so follow that. This isn't necessarily a complete how-to on how to do it. Tons of other videos that do that. I'm just kind of giving a very brief whirlwind. I'm not going to repeat the same content. I'm not going to repeat what the Circuitron instructions say, but let's do a quick time lapse of me wiring up. You'll see that I won't do a couple of the wires, because we're just going to pull them straight off the actual Tortoise switch machine that's already out there. So not all the wiring is going to be in place. But what I did do for the return loop was I actually wired everything and then ran long lengths, because we had to go back about 18 inches on the bench work. So basically everything got wired, and then it was one like big loop of wiring that went back to the back of the bench work, because that's where the turnouts and the Tortoise switch machines were. Here, at least for this one, the switch machine is right up at the front. When I do, if we flip it around, when I end up doing the other turnouts, what will end up happening is that this is going to be further away from where the panel actually is, and so we are going to have to do that. Actually, now that I say that, I'm going to go and look and measure, because even though the switch machine is right at the front, I should probably figure out exactly where I want to put this panel. So yeah, I'm going to do that. So you may well see me actually put a long pigtail in here for what's going to run out to the Tortoise switch machine. The accessory buses are still going to be short. What goes to the Tortoise switch machine, again, it's just whatever length you need to be able to get there. So they're going to be all kinds of different lengths. But yeah, I'll double check and see. I might wire some on, but again, if you were doing paneling right by where the switch machines were, you can probably just use that 6 to 9 inches or whatever that you had to come straight into the back of here, and it's pretty easy from there. So let's do a time lapse of wiring all this up. Pretty straightforward, but at least you'll see the process that I go through. Alright, so some of that gets a little bit fiddly, but this is now, whilst that is complete. So yes, some of these wires are a little bit longer maybe, but again, it's because you need to kind of reserve the right to be able to swap the LEDs around depending on the orientation of the switch. I will also go back through and then use liquid tape on these again, and could also do it down on the switch contacts as well if you really wanted to, or you could, be really fancy and do heat shielding across all of them. I don't think it's that big of a deal on these double pole double throw switches. They're not really going to be carrying a whole lot of current, and again, if you're careful with your wiring, you're not getting close enough at all to make contact. On any wiring like this, the same as I do on the bus wiring, yeah, I'll use liquid tape, or I do heat shrink some things as well, just to make sure that they can't touch, but around by the switch, it's probably okay. And again, kind of economy of scale, the amount that I'm doing, I kind of skipped that fiddly part. So I'm going to leave this as it is. We're going to go over to the layout, see if we can make some of these final connections, and then check it out and see how it all works. Alright, so for the purposes of this little video, I've just ran one screw in there just to loosely hold it in place. It's obviously not where it can be because I've got some LEDs that are going to go in there. But we do have this switch hooked up, so let's kind of think back through the wiring, see if we can spin around on the back a little bit. I got a point thing, and then so the black and red on the top, that was terminals 1 and 2. They are going into the accessory bus, and then it is essentially what's coming off of terminals 3 and 4. Those middle terminals is what then spins around over here, which runs to contacts 1 and 2 on that Tortoise switch machine. Now, as absolute luck would have it, I did get this the right way around. So right now we've got the light illuminated, and that is correct. We have the diverging route set. If we come down to our double throw switch and put it down the bottom, light changes, and now we've got just that straight through thrown. So this isn't 100% prototypical in a way, and one thing that I found, I think it was Signal Logic at TrendFest, was that rather than just simply following the power from a toggle switch or following power from what's being sent out to the Tortoise contacts, it will actually measure the stall the stall current of the Tortoise point motor. And so basically it understands when it's fully being thrown, the stall current is a different value than when it's in motion. And so once it's finished moving, it measures that stall current difference and it's like, okay, now you finished moving, you have actually completed the operation to throw one way or the other, and then it would go ahead and it would change the LED status. Because in theory, as soon as I throw this, LED changes, but it's actually still in motion. All right, same thing. Throw the switch, LED changes, it's still in motion. And so a train technically isn't cleared, but we're not doing signal logic yet. So this is okay. As far as I'm concerned, I am totally fine with this. All right. If something were to go wrong, then sure, maybe in the future I'll look at some kind of logic, but at least for now, this is fine. Now, one thing that I did also go ahead and do, not sure how well it focuses, is I connected up that green frog wire and I connected blue and white out to the DCC bus. Whilst I've been doing this, track power is turned off. I always turn off my track power, DCC track power, before I start doing any kind of wiring. So I'm now going to turn on the track power. I'm going to grab a multimeter, and what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of measure what the voltage is going through the track and see if we actually have that frog polarity, not polarity, frog phase, but we'll go with polarity. We've got that frog polarity set correctly. If we don't, and it's the inverse of what the track power is, then all we'll do is on the connections into the DCC bus, we'll swap white and red. So I am a little OCD. If you are really OCD, that might annoy you. If you wanted to, you could change it on the Tortoise. I am okay with just flip-flopping blue and white if I have to, but I'm going to get track power turned on, grab multimeter. Let's come back and do this final check and see what this frog itself is actually going to be doing. All right, so this is the part of the video where Ian talks about electronics that he doesn't really understand, and people will correct him in the comments because that's what people do. But I got my multimeter set to something that gives me a reading. going to be intentionally vague here. Figure out your own multimeter. I know what the readings kind of mean, but I'm not going to try and explain it enough. But anyway, I have numbers that appear on my multimeter as I kind of move around. Okay, so if we've got our diverging track coming in here, and then we come actually just past where the frog is, yeah, my power's okay there, and all of this is exactly as I would expect. We'll come onto the main line, we'll come down just past where the frog is, and we got the same reading. Now, I would 110% expect that to be the case. I would have had bigger problems otherwise if I didn't. Okay, we can come all the way down by the, I'm not going to say it's the throat because I don't think it is the throat. Again, someone will correct me in the comments. But come down to the bottom of the turnout, and again, we're okay there. So this is all fine. This has nothing to do with the frog power. On these Atlas Code 55 turnouts, these are electro frogs, and so it's all isolated. This is the frog part right here. It's kind of hard to see because it's code 55. You're dealing with N scale, right? It's small. But there is this little part here that's isolated from the rest. Right here, the track is disconnected. And you don't have to power this if you don't want to. If you have a bunch of modern locomotives, it will be fine. Even though on some of the Kato locos, like my P42 Amtraks and like my FP7 Milwaukee Road ones from Kato, both Kato locos, I thought that they were all-wheel pickup, multi-wheel pickup on the trucks, but for some reason they seem to be stalling and having problems. So my intent was always that I would be wiring up the frog. So there we go. That should fix it. So like I say, we'll come through, we have a reading. That's just the hand control, I believe, deciding that's going to turn itself off. And we come down, we have reading. All right, so we know that we're doing okay as we come through here. When we then come to the frog, though, it stays at 0. Come back just past the frog, we have our reading. When we come to our frog, it's at 0. Now, what if I do? I'm going to leave this connector there, and I'm going to come over, and now I have a reading. So what that's telling me is that my frog is actually inverted from where it needs to be. If we come onto this diverging route, we come through, it's okay. We come through, it's okay. We come into the frog, and it's not quite right. It works there, but if we come this way, it's not, right? So I've got it inverted. So I am going to, in real time, without stopping the video, so that people then claim that I'm doing something, all that I'm doing is swapping over those blue and white wires underneath that comes off the Tortoise switch machine onto my DCC accessory bus. If I can do it and talk at the same time and not throw all the rest of my tools over. And so again, we've got the man line set, so we should find we've got reading, and now we have a reading. So let's see what happens if I throw the turnout on my panel. Come up here, reading, okay. And so if we try doing this, for example, I can actually see my colors. No, yeah, so now that is on the reading. So again, if we then flip back down onto our mainline route, come just past the frog, we got a reading into the frog, and we have a reading. All right, so again, it'll annoy you a little bit, maybe, that you now have a blue wire coming from the Tortoise switch machine that goes to white on the DCC accessory bus, and the white from the Tortoise goes to the blue on the DCC bus rather than the accessory bus. But that's why it's so that this little tiny little frog power, if we come in here, this is the part that is disconnected right there where that kind of black is. And so this is the tiny little part that we're powering With the Atlas Code 55, it's actually really nice in how they wire it. All you have to do is drop in one wire here and then drop in your feeders either side over here, and it wires everything up for you. This part is what we're then running off the Tortoise though, and so now we have live power that goes all the way through, and it follows the correct DCC phase depending on if mainline or that diverging route is set. So final test is going to be run a locomotive. So let me grab one, and then let's make sure that we can move forward and backwards through here. We shouldn't have any kind of stalling because we've got the right DCC phase and everything. All right, so quick sanity check on our panel. Again, backlighting's a little bit hard to see, but I promise you that bottom LED is lit. Our switch is down, which means we are on the main line, which is correct. Here is one of the Cardo locos. I've dropped the other ones off the track to make sure that the entire conduit doesn't decide to start moving through, because I didn't want to try and move the whole train through. Let's try and get it going the right way. Didn't want to try and bring the whole Empire Builder through, because that will take a while. Not going to try, going, throwing the switch and stuff like that, because just by virtue of the fact that that locomotive made it through there just fine, means that the frog power is set correctly. We don't have any kind of problems there. All right, so that's kind of it. Again, not necessarily a how-to video. There's a ton of those already out there on the Tortoise point motors, but honestly, I kind of feel like it's straightforward enough that even this kind of whirlwind will probably do it. The paneling does get a little bit different. I understand that, and so maybe I can go into a little bit more in a future video on the panel wiring itself. But again, just follow what it says on the actual Tortoise instruction sheet for doing the double pole double throw switch, and they have information again on their website that shows you how you wire in these LEDs. Like, this isn't something that I came up with. All I did come up with was this part for the actual layout itself. And so I have a little K40 laser cutter, an engraver, a little Chinese K40, about $300, something like that. It is limited to doing stuff 8 inches by 12 inches, but it's fine for stuff like this. So I'm pretty happy with the actual layout of it. It does then have the Empire Builder font as well, so I think that is kind of cool. But again, I might go through and use a little bit of a thicker acrylic. This was just cheap stuff that I could get quick on Amazon. I think I'll probably step up to a 5mm acrylic that has a little bit of a thicker black layer as well. But proof of concept, it works great. And so again, these LEDs aren't glued in. You maybe saw me just pushing them in. These just have the nut on the top there to hold them in place, and so it'll be really trivial when I'm ready to swap them out, just to pop the LEDs, the switches out, put them all back in. Again, this isn't the final position. Once the fascia is in place, I'll end up cutting out, or probably just have a big hole in the middle. There'll be some kind of thing that will raise it off, maybe it's half an inch or so, just so that there's enough room for the LEDs in the back of those double pole, double throw switches. The wiring will then run through the middle okay as well. And again, that's why they're kind of left in. So what I am going to go and do is just quick solder these up. They'll be quick to desolder if I need to. Same with things like DCC connections. What goes into the accessory bus I'm going to leave, because I have another 4 of these switches that I have to go and do. And so I think what I'll do is I'll take this down, run over, solder up all of the other ones, get the rest of these Tortoise point motors in place, and then we'll come back and we'll have a quick look once everything is wired in here. For you, it's going to be a few seconds. For me, this is probably going to be a couple of nights worth of work or so. Okay, then, so a little bit of soldering later. Here is that panel completed. I have kind of cable tied these ones together. These are the ones that are going to be running out to the DC accessory bus. So I did wire each of them up separately, just so that I make sure that there's enough power that is going to each of those Tortoise switch machines and the LEDs. I didn't want to kind of chain it off just the one black and red run that will be going back. I didn't want it to be sharing power. It also means that if I need to, I can just quick cut the zip ties and take out just an individual switch and individual LEDs if I need to. And it's not just kind of the one bus going back. So These are then the ones that would be going to the individual Tortoise switch machines, kind of like we saw with this first one here as well. Let's put a quick zip tie on that. But otherwise, all 5 of these switches and LEDs are now in place and ready to go. So I'm going to flip over to the layout, at least get these accessory bus ones wired in, and then also get that first Tortoise switch machine that we had done connected back up to. This is with the panel now in place. Yeah, it's just kind of hanging out again temporarily whilst I figure this out. If we look inside, I do then have all of those power feeders in place into the accessory bus. Haven't soldered them up yet. And I did then go ahead and get our other, that first Tortoise switch machine connected back up. So again, you see the lights displayed. And you can see that it's also then moving that switch, moving the turnout as I throw it. So 4 more Tortoise switch machines now to wire up and start to get in place. This is kind of the hardest part. Doing the Tortoise switch machines is fairly straightforward. So get the 4 of those wired at the workbench and then get them over here onto the layout and start to get them fitted. Alright, so real quick, this is the 4 of those other Tortoise switch machines all wired up. You might have seen on the other one that I've already installed that we went through that I also kind of bundled up the additional black, red, and yellow. They're going to be used, future use for signaling probably, or at least something yet to be determined depending on which way I go with signaling. So they're wired in, they're just kind of coiled up out the way, and that also makes it a little bit easy for me to make sure that when I grab the black and red, it's the black and red that's going to be actually running the Tortoise switch machine. So I'm going to move over to layout, I'm going to get these 4 installed, and then we'll come back once everything is connected into the panel, hopefully. Alright, this is then everything wired up. Again, a little bit hard to see with some of that backlighting coming through from the actual layout lights, and it's just kind of hanging here until I get the fascia in place. But I'm getting pretty close. I think once I've figured out signals and start to put some signals in, then it'll be time to do the fascias. So gone through and polarity tested everything, yeah, worked out pretty good getting all of the Tortoise switch machines in, forward, backwards, forward, backwards, forward, backwards. Tied up a bunch of the wiring. Everything's all soldered in now as well. Just need to go and hit everything with a little bit of liquid tape. I think I need to go and grab some, although I think I'm pretty much out. So I'm going to wrap this one up for now. So hopefully this was somewhat interesting. Again, not necessarily a straight how-to on how to go ahead and install the switch machines and do the paneling, because it's fairly self-explanatory, really, just by following the Circuitron instructions. I might come back and do a separate video on doing like the laser cut paneling, because that's when it starts to get a little bit more complicated in terms of putting in those double pole, double throw switches and putting in the LEDs as well. But otherwise, everything is just straight out that little instruction sheet that you get from Circuitron for each of the Tortoise switch machines. But now I've got a total of 9, I think. I've got the return loop there, 5 here on the south side of the station, and another 2 on the north side of the station. So very happy with how these have gone. Again, economy of scale, figuring out, okay, as I go out and do the rest of them, how much is this going to cost me and how much is it all going to come to? That's why I'm doing things like soldering everything on to the bottom of the Tortoise switch machines rather than using the little screw terminal adapters that you can get, because, they're $4, $5, $6 a piece, depending on how many of them you're buying at a time. So hope you enjoyed this one. I'm going to move on to exploring a little bit of signaling, I think, next, because that's then going to wrap up at least the wiring side of stuff around the Seattle area, and it'll also help me as I move on, passing sidings in Skycomish down to Leavenworth, but more so as I do that last stretch on the lower deck on the other side here of the peninsula to make my way over to Tacoma. So thanks for watching this one. I'll be back again soon. Thanks. Bye.